welcome to NLTI. In the CLAT exam, vocabulary is power. If you misread any term, it can actually cost you an entire question, even if your reasoning, your logic, that was absolutely correct. So in this video, I will quickly walk you through all the important legal terms that a CLAT aspirant must be comfortable with. So let's get started. First of all, let's understand why is it even important to understand these legal terms when you're preparing for CLAT examination. So first of all, a lot of legal reasoning passages, they are based on legal terms and legal principles. And in those passages, CLAT sort of assumes that you are familiar with the legal term. So the exam is not going to stop and explain you these terms. If you're familiar, if you are slightly aware about the meaning of these terms, it is going to save you a lot of time and effort. Secondly, a lot of questions are actually hinged on understanding one single term. If you misread that one term, your entire question can go wrong. So it's really important that you at least should be aware with the basics. Next, lately we've seen in static GK as well, some questions around legal vocabulary and legal terminology is being tested. So basic understanding of legal doctrines and legal maxims can help you score marks even in the GK and current affairs section. And like I've already mentioned, you cannot afford to misread the term. If you misread any term, it can actually cost you an entire question. You will lose marks. So let's get started with the most important legal terms that you should be familiar with. Starting with criminal law. Some words that every law aspirant must be aware. First term is actus reus, which means the actual act that has caused harm. Second term is mens rea, which means the intention behind the act or the guilty mind. See, in criminal law, it is said that the two most important essentials to commit a crime are guilty mind and the action that has been committed. So, guilty mind here stands for mens rea and the action, the physical action is actus reus. So, together, mens rea and actus reus makes a crime, right? Any criminal act done with a motive or intention to cause harm is a crime. So, actus reus plus mens rea becomes a crime. The next term that we have is corpus delicti, which means proof that a crime has really happened. For example, if someone says that my house has been robbed, police comes to the premises and finds that the lock was broken, the window was broken, the items are missing, it shows that robbery has actually happened. So that is corpus delicti. The next term that we have is double jeopardy, which means that a person cannot be punished twice for the same crime. So if a person has been proven guilty for something and has been punished already for the same crime, for the same incident, he cannot be punished again. Simple. The next term that we have is bail, which means temporary release before trial. Bail does not mean that the person has been released from the prison permanently. It's temporary. He can go back to the prison. He can be imprisoned again. Next, we have terminologies related to writs. Now, writs under constitutional law are really important and all the writs are frequently tested in CLAT. So it's very important for you to understand what is the meaning of each writ, each term that is there. The first term that we have is habeas corpus, which means producing the detained person before the court. This sort of writ is used when a person has been detained without any justified reason. So it basically means that produce the detained person before the court and justify why that person was detained. Second writ that we have is mandamus, which means court tells authority to do its duty. If any state, any public authority is not doing its job properly, it's not doing its duty properly, then the court can order that authority to do the needful. Third writ that we have is certiorari, which means higher court cancels lower court order. It's simple, right? If the lower court has passed any order wrongfully or without the authority, then the higher court has the authority to cancel or quash that order. Next writ that we have is quo warranto, which means on what authority are you holding this office? This writ is used when someone is suspected to hold any public office or post without proper appointment or qualification. In that case, the court asks that person that by what authority are you actually holding this position. Like I've already mentioned, writs are one of the most important topics from constitutional law when you're preparing for CLAT. And remember, these are not just static GK definitions. CLAT often tests these writs in legal reasoning passages as well. So you need to recognize all of them in context. Let's move ahead with the terminologies which are often used in procedural law. CLAT can also ask you a lot of legal questions which can be about procedure and power. So understanding the basic terminologies of procedural law is something which is very important. So the first term is jurisdiction, which means does this court even have the power? Before anything else, first thing that has to be checked is whether a court has the power to hear a specific case or not. For example, a district court cannot hear a case which can be heard by a Supreme Court. For example, a district court cannot hear a Supreme Court appeal, or a Delhi court cannot hear a case that has actually happened in Mumbai. Why? Because they do not have the territorial, pecuniary, or original jurisdiction around that case. So if a court does not have jurisdiction on that matter, it cannot hear that case. The next term is cognizable offense. Cognizable offenses are those offenses where the police has the power to arrest someone without a warrant. And then we have non-cognizable offense. These are those offenses where the police cannot arrest anyone without a warrant and a prior permission of the magistrate. That means a criminal judge is required for the same. The next term that we have is appeal, which means asking a higher court to review. So if any party to the dispute is not satisfied with the decision that a lower court has given, it can go to a higher court and ask the higher court to review the decision of the lower court. That is called an appeal. And the last procedural term that you should know is stay order, which means everything pauses temporarily. For example, a construction company is building a shopping mall in an area and the locals are not happy about it, and they file a petition saying that this construction violates any rules. So now if the court issues a stay order, it will actually mean that the construction company has to pause the construction temporarily until the matter is fully decided by the court. Next, we are going to understand about terminologies that are used in civil and contract law. In civil law and contract law passages, you will see some terms being repeated again and again. So let's get familiar with the same. The first term is plaintiff, which means person who files the case. So the person who is basically aggrieved and who starts a civil case is called a plaintiff. He starts the case by filing a plaint in a court. The next term is defendant. Defendant is the person against whom the plaintiff files a case. So the person who is being accused or sued by the plaintiff is a defendant. The next term is specific performance, which means the court forces contract to be completed. Specific performance is when the court doesn't just award money, but it forces someone to fulfill the obligations of the contract as it was agreed. The next term that we have is lien, which means right to hold property until payment. Right to lien gives you the right to hold someone else's property till the time they pay what they owe to you. You can think of it like a collateral, which you can keep until the entire debt is repaid. The next term is quid pro quo, which means something in return. In legal terms, it means an exchange. One party gives something to the other and in return expects something back. For example, your company offers you a promotion if you agree to do some extra work. This term is often used in contract law or employment disputes. Alright, next we have terms that are used often in evidence law. The first term is burden of proof, which means who must prove the claim. So in a criminal case, usually one party has to prove that something wrong has happened to him or her. So whosoever has to prove that something wrong has happened will bear the burden of proof. The next term is prima facie, which means on the face of it, enough evidence at first glance. Something which is evident in the first sight itself. For example, if I say that a person has died and his dead body is something which is evidently visible to you, then it is a prima facie evidence that a person has died. The next term is res judicata, which means something which is already decided and cannot be reopened. So, in civil law, if a case has already been decided by the court for the same parties, for the same subject matter, for the same dispute, then it cannot be reopened in the same court again. The next term is estoppel, which means you cannot contradict your earlier stand, which means you cannot go back to your earlier statement or conduct if someone has relied upon it. For example, imagine that you asked your neighbor that it's completely fine, you can park your car in my garage. So now when your neighbor actually goes and try to park his car in your garage, you stop him. You say that no, you're not allowed to do it. So in this case, the principle of estoppel will be applied and you will not be allowed to contradict your previous statement. You cannot go back to that statement and change it. So this term is often used in contract or civil law, and it is often tested in contract or civil law passages as well. The next term that we have is affidavit, which means sworn written statement. It is a statement which is in written form and which is taken on oath. So you are basically swearing that this has happened and you are giving it in written. It is in written form and it is signed in front of a person who is authorized to take oath. For example, a notary officer or a magistrate. Alright, moving ahead. The next terms are few Latin terms which CLAT often checks, often tests in legal reasoning passages. First term is audi alterum partem, which means hear both sides. So the principle of natural justice says that both the parties will always have the right to present their sides. Why? Because they have the right to be heard. They have audi alterum partem. Next term is res ipsa loquitur. The facts speak for themselves. For example, a patient goes to a surgery and a surgical instrument is left inside his body. So, in that case, it is medical negligence. No extra proof for the same is required, right? The fact is speaking for itself. The surgical instrument inside the body of the patient in itself is telling that medical negligence has happened here. The next term that we have is nemo dat quod non-habet, which means you cannot transfer what you do not own. I cannot sell your mobile phone to someone else. You cannot sell my mobile phone to someone else. Why? Because I do not own your mobile phone and you do not own my mobile phone. So you cannot transfer something which you do not have ownership on. The next term that we have is ultra vires, which means beyond legal authority. This term is used when any person or institution does something which they are legally not authorized to do. For example, if a municipal corporation, they passes a law which allows them to collect income tax, that will be ultra vires. Why? Because only the central government has the power to collect income tax and not the local authorities. The next term that we have is suo motu, which means court acts on its own. It means when a court takes any action without any formal complaint or request. For example, a newspaper reports severe water contamination in an area. The court notices it and initiates a case on its own without any formal complaint. This will be called a suo motu action. One thing that you have to keep in mind while preparing these Latin maxims, that do not try to cram it, do not try to rote memorize it. First, try to understand what each maxim is actually saying and then try to apply those maxims in practical situations. It'll be easier for you to understand the maxims as well, and it'll be easier for you to answer the questions based on these maxims correctly. Let's proceed ahead. Now we are going to understand some terminologies which are usually used in precedent and judgments. The first term that we have is stare decisis, which means follow previous decisions. So, if the Supreme Court of India has already given a judgment on a certain point, the lower courts will also follow it. The next term that we have is ratio decidendi, which means the binding legal reasoning. It is that part of the judgment which is binding on both of the parties. It is the principle that actually decides the outcome of the case and something which the future courts would also follow in similar cases. The next term that we have is obiter dicta, which means extra observations and not binding. This is the opinion of the judges or any observations made by them while explaining the case. This part of the judgment is not binding. So in a judgment, there are two parts, ratio decidendi and obiter dicta. Ratio decidendi is going to be the binding part, which both the parties are bound to follow, while obiter dicta is just opinion of the court, some explanation by the judges, which is not binding on the parties. The next term that we have is sub judice, which means matter under court consideration. This means that a case is currently pending before the court, so no comment on the same can be made freely at this point. The next set of legal terms that you should know is related to the concept of liability under law of torts. The first term is strict liability, which means no need to prove intention. So this means that a person is responsible for any negligence that has happened, even if he was not the negligent person. For example, let's say a factory has caused chemical leakage. In that case, owner of the factory will be responsible even if it was not him who was negligent or irresponsible. The next term that we have is absolute liability, which means no exceptions at all. This type of liability under law of torts is even stricter. There are no exceptions at all. There's no defense, no accident that can be claimed to protect you from absolute liability. The next term that we have is vicarious liability, which means one person is responsible for another. For example, an employer may be held liable for any negligent work that has been done by his employee. The last term is tortfeasor, which means person who has committed the civil wrong, trespass or negligence, any type of tort done by a person, that person will be known as a tortfeasor. Now let's understand how do you actually have to use these terms properly. So what do you have to keep in mind is that you do not have to memorize it, you have to understand it better. And while reading and solving legal reasoning passages, try to identify which of these terms or these principles are actually being tested. If you will solve more legal passages, you will come across more such terminologies, which is going to enhance your legal vocabulary. Better legal vocabulary will boost your confidence and will also improve speed and accuracy of question solving. And trust me, that's the real advantage. You will know what all you're reading, you will be quicker in solving questions, and your solutions will be more accurate. And that's it. It was a quick walkthrough of some of the most important legal terms that are tested in CLAT. So start applying these terms more whenever you are solving legal passages, and trust me, you will see the difference. I really hope you found this video useful. Thank you for watching and all the very best for your CLAT preparation.